reintroduce a young man, come up here and give her a reprieve. Would you go ahead and introduce yourself, Ray?
Thanks, Judith. My name is Hale. Whoa. And I'm here to talk about Lee Oswald and who he was as a person. I've read a lot of books over the years, and the 50th anniversary really disturbed me. All the footage, the TV shows, the articles, and most of what I was observing and watching, to me, was completely inaccurate of who he was. And I was angry. And so I went out and I started reading as many books as I could that were, whether he talked about him being guilty or innocent. And the guilty books, I just couldn't get through because the through line to all of them was a psychological profile that he was unstable. And that was clearly not the case. Captain Fritz, District Attorney Wade, Police Chief Curry, all said that he was not mentally unstable and that he was rather sharp. And they were the first, Fritz spent 17 hours with him, so I think he would know. And in the reading, I came across Judith's book. And if you don't have it, definitely buy it, read it. I think it's the most important book out there, one of them, if not the most. And her book really humanized Lee Oswald. The first book that instead of just seeing the name Oswald and it being kind of this mysterious character, it gave a background to who he was. And so I went out and started reading more books that with people that spent some time with him. And I'm going to share a few of those today. Richard Nagel was a war hero from the Korean War. He knew 3 languages, was an intelligence operative, and here's what he had to say about his association with Lee and describing him. He was a cool customer. I don't think he ever let his emotions get the best of him. Put it this way about Oswald. If I was mountain climbing, I would trust that guy to hold the end of my rope in a crisis. He was articulate, and he could hold a good conversation on just about anything political. He was certainly no raving maniac. George de Mohrenschildt, I think most of you know who he is. Again, oh, sorry, five languages, master's degree, an operative throughout most of his career, knew George Bush Sr., the Bouvier family. Here's what he wrote a manuscript towards the end of his life called I'm Just a Patsy. And here's describing his first meeting with Lee in Lee's house. Lee walked in, he wore overalls and clean working man's shoes. Even in his modest attire, there was something extraordinary about this man. And only someone who had never met Lee could call him insignificant. I remember thinking there is something outstanding about this man. And this is an interview with Dick Russell, The Man Who Knew Too Much. Is a great book, you should read that as well. Lee Oswald was smart as hell. He was the most honest man I knew, ahead of his time, really. He would have gone to a black college or school if he could. And I will tell you this, I'm sure he did not shoot the president. That's George de Mohrenschildt. This is Ernst Titovitz.
Titovitz, it's okay, he's from Russia.
He befriended Lee when Lee was in Russia, and he later became a doctor. And Norman Mailer, who wrote his book, interviewed Ernst, and this is what Ernst said. With Norman Mailer, it was sort of unfortunate. He wanted to find black, dark things to represent his Oswald. Unfortunately, we didn't see eye to eye. And I just didn't want to figure to give evidence against Oswald in that negative way because it wasn't true, you know? Never for a moment I believed that he was capable of pulling a trigger at a president whom he loved and admired. This is Buell Frazier, who took Lee to the depository and to the pain cells on Fridays. Lee was an excellent worker and a good person. It was a pleasure to work with him, very intelligent and well-read. When Lee did speak, he impressed me with his vocabulary, and he was always polite to me and the other workers. I feel fortunate I got to see a side of Lee that most people will never see. When you read about him, it's all terrible things. You don't get to hear or read about the good things. Lee was very good with children. I knew that because I had 3 young nieces living in the same house. They talked about him, they loved him, they called him Mr. Lee. And on Fridays, the neighborhood children would congregate around the Payne's front yard, around an oak tree, because that's the day when Mr. Lee would come visit. And the last one is from Marina Oswald Porter. She wrote a letter to the Assassination Record Review Board, I believe in 1992. And this is some of what she said in her letter. I definitely think that Lee Oswald did not kill President Kennedy. I think he was giving up to pacify people as a patsy. I believe that Lee Oswald was an FBI informant. I request the full particulars in the original teletype received by Mr. William Walter in the New Orleans FBI office on the morning of November 17, 1963, warning of a possible assassination attempt on President Kennedy in Dallas. I now believe that my former husband met with the Dallas FBI on November 16, 1963, and provided informant information on which this teletype was based. At the time of the assassination of this great president whom I loved, I was misled the evidence represented to me by government authorities, and I assisted in the conviction of Lee Harvey Oswald as the assassin. From the new information now available, I am now convinced that he was an FBI informant and believe that he did not kill President Kennedy. It is time for Americans to know their full history. That's Marina Oswald. You can find that online. It's really impressive. So really quickly, I tracked down a guy named Jim Botello. His name was mentioned in the books, and he was a former Marine. He was a roommate of Lee Oswald, and a former California judge. And we have, yeah, he's ill right now. And I talked to him on the phone a few times, and I asked him if I could come interview him, and he said sure. And went down there, and he had just taken a bad spill. And I said, "You sure you want to do this?" He said, "Oh, I definitely want to do this." And so we put him on camera, and this is the interview. Hello, former U.S. Marine, police officer, and California judge. He's going to answer a few questions for us regarding Lee Harvey Oswald and his experience with Lee. So, when and where did you first meet Lee Oswald?
I met Lee Oswald back in 1957 when he transferred from the outfit that he was in Japan back to the United States. He happened to belong to the same outfit, Max and I Marine Corps.
What was your impression of him, of who he was?
He was a very likable fellow, friendly. He was not overly aggressive or physically playful like a lot of the other Marines like to get.
Do some wrestling, yeah. And was he intelligent, did you think?
He's very intelligent. Though at the time it was believed that he didn't have a high school diploma, but that didn't show whatever.
And he was your roommate, correct?
Yeah, he was a natural intelligence. He was a great guy, I thought.
And did you think one of the things you mentioned to me on the phone, you told me that he had integrity more than most people. Would you say that's accurate?
Yes, he did.
Was he a good roommate?
He was the best roommate I've ever had. He was being married a couple of times.
There you go. And one of the things you also told me was that you guys had a record player, and you bought some records together.
Yes, we did. It wasn't. We all didn't have television sets in our room, and so our entertainment was the record player that we had.
And you classical music?
We played classical music, a number of different tunes. His favorite seemed to be the 1812 Overture, as was mine.
Tchaikovsky. He went home with you.
Yeah.
You took him home to see your family.
Yeah, we travel in my car up here from Santa Ana and go to Liberty, and weekend we'd just head back to work at Tustin Air Base. We were stationed up. He missed missed the last qualifying of at the rifle range. He was the main company clerk at the time, and which is interesting in itself because they said his clearance was taken away. However, being a company clerk in our outfit, which was a headquarters outfit, we had all sorts of top secret information in the company office, and that's what he had access to.
So it was taken away, but in theory he had access to all kinds of
In
information.
fact, the Warren report shows that